Start the recording? No, you started it.
Yes, hello everyone. Today we're talking about developing an international experience program for students. My name is Mila Sokolянska. I'm a global education coordinator, and today I'm having a conversation with Paul Campbell, chair of a Cook program, and Doug McFarland, instructor from Alternative Energy Technology. So we're hoping that after this discussion, after this session, you will have an idea what it takes to set up a program if you want your students to go abroad and have a field school or study abroad trip. We'll be sharing lots of resources, and Paul and Doug will be talking about their experiences with their students. So let's start. And I would like to share first what global education and partnerships do at NAIT. So basically, our team focuses on enhancing our awareness of other cultures and developing attitudes, knowledge, skills, and practices to collaborate effectively across our differences, including cultures. And also, NAIT supports opportunities to work with various organizations, including nonprofit, and also recognized industry partners to develop instructor-led, program-aligned student learning opportunities such as field school, study tours, and inbound and outbound exchange. So without further ado, I will pass it to Doug.
Hello, everybody. I'm Doug McFarland, and I'm an instructor in the Alternative Energy Technology program at NAIT. We have a partnership with a nonprofit organization called Light Up the World, and we started that partnership in 2016. And since that point in time, we've been doing a variety of different kinds of projects with them. Light Up the World is they're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to bringing electricity to people who do not currently have access to electricity. So mostly in remote communities in developing nations. And we've done projects since 2017. Our first project, next slide, Mila. In 2017, we went to Guatemala for our first project, and that was a lot of fun. And then our partnership sort of grew from there. We only took 7 students in 2017. In 2018, we went to Peru, and we've really kind of focused on Peru ever since then. So we did projects in 2018, 2019, and in 2020, we had 2 projects that were planned, and they got canceled due to COVID. And then last year, we were able to travel once again, and we did one project in a remote community way up high in the Andes Mountains in Peru called Colpapata. And this coming May in 2023, we have 2 projects planned.
Excellent, thank you. And so let's see what's the history of program for Paul.
Yeah, hi. So in the culinary program, we have actually 3 areas where we do have partners. So Italy, Portugal, and the Philippines, and we rotate through those 3 countries year to year. So our last travel was previous to COVID was in 2019. We went to Italy, and so our students actually spend a month in Italy working and experiencing the culture and the and everything that Italy has to offer. And then coming up here, we will begin our travel once again, and we'll be going to Portugal for the month of June.
That's great. That's awesome. I can only imagine how cool it is to go and experience all this in another country. So little bit of an overview. So getting the program started. So we'll be talking about learning outcomes, how to find a partner in a place you want to go. We'll be talking over some legal documents, memorandum of understanding, and also we'll go a little bit into details about planning your actual visit. So let's talk about learning outcomes. I believe that's.
All right. So do you want me to speak to this, Mila?
Yeah, if you
Yeah, sure.
can.
So there are all sorts of things that students can learn when they have an international experience. So the way I approached trying to think about the learning outcomes is to think about what sort of valuable skills and knowledge our students can gain from the experience that they wouldn't get at NAIT in the classroom or in the lab. So there are some discipline-specific outcomes that our students can get that connect directly to the industry, but more importantly, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of outcomes that are things that you just can't get in the classroom or lab. Things that are related to intercultural competencies, global education outcomes, and that sort of thing. When we first started our program back in 2017, um, it was not part of a class, and last year, what we did was we developed a brand new class for the Alternative Energy Technology program, where the international learning experience is now connected to a 15-week winter semester class. So during the 15 weeks of the winter semester, there's all sorts of time in there for us to explore all sorts of aspects of intercultural competency, intercultural communication, global education, all that kind of thing. And so I developed some formal learning outcomes that go with that class. And I developed a course description as well. So next slide, Mila. Um, in order to come up with a really, good wording for a lot of those learning outcomes for the course, and to really think about what students are going to get from the international experience, there's a variety of different resources that I consulted for this process. Um, First of all, first and foremost, the best resource I found was NAIT's course for intercultural competency for staff. I took that class, I guess, a year and a half ago. I think it was the first offering of that class, and it was just fantastic. So I recommend that class to everyone. It's an asynchronous Moodle course, and then there's also an opportunity to interact with other students in the class during meetings and stuff like that. In addition to that, there's a variety of different resources you could have a look through. The Government of Canada has a document called Building on Success, International Education Strategy. And in that document, Canada talks about the value of international education, what the country of Canada is hoping to get from international education, how it's going to benefit the country. And there's a similar document for the government of Alberta as well. Alberta's International Education Strategy, a post-secondary approach to attracting and developing global talent. Both of those, they do a good job of talking about the value of international education and global skills. And you can come up with some really good ideas and phrasing for learning outcomes from those. NAIT is working right now on a strategy for global education, and maybe Mila, do you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
Yes, sure. So as we speak, and it's end of December 2022, our strategy for international and global education is being developed. So, and of course, it would include certain parts about our study abroad experiences for students and building more international partnerships. So we're hoping that early 2023, this policy, this strategy, this framework will be live. And also you can find some resources in this strategy.
Yeah, I saw an earlier draft of that strategy, I think, like sometime last year, and there were some good resources in there, and there were some good ideas of, the benefits to students in there, and that's really what would be important for developing learning outcomes. On the next slide, there are some other resources as well that I found very useful. The OECD, PISA has a document called Preparing Our Youth for an Inclusive and Sustainable World, a Global Competence Framework. That's just fantastic. It's got all sorts of learning outcomes that are written for you. Basically, you can pick and choose the ones that you like from there and think about how that might apply to your program. UNESCO, the International Bureau of Education, has some resources, and probably one of the foremost scholars in the world in this area is Darla Deerdorf, and there's an open access book called the Manual for Developing Intercultural Competencies. It's not a really long book, it's only about 100 pages long, but that's very useful as well. And then last, I found a pretty helpful document called Humans Wanted, How Canadian Youth Can Thrive in the Age of Disruption, which is published by RBC, and there's a link to the PDF there on that. It's not just about international education, but it's got stuff about what the future of the workforce is going to look like, and what the way higher education needs to sort of shift in order to provide students with those kinds of skills that people are going to need in the future. On the next slide, I can give you an example of how I put this into place. The class that we developed is ALTI 2747. It's called Global Energy Issues and Intercultural Competency. For the first time this coming May, or this coming semester in 2023, we're going to be offering this class to other students across other programs at NAIT as well. So I'm very excited about that. Anyway, here's the course description. Millions of people from a multitude of different cultures around the world lack access to clean, affordable energy. Executing clean energy projects in diverse communities requires intercultural competency and communication skills, along with cultural awareness and sensitivity. In this course, students build intercultural competencies by working on a clean energy or sustainability-related project involving people of a different culture. Students set intercultural competency goals, explore aspects of the community culture, and develop risk mitigation strategies. So I wrote that course description specifically to be kind of vague, so that it's not specific to what we're doing right now, which is solar, off-grid solar energy system installations in remote communities in Peru specifically. I wrote it more generally so that moving into the future, we can engage in different kinds of projects in different parts of the world. We don't necessarily have to do solar all the time. We could do a biogas project, or we could do some other kind of sustainability related project. And it doesn't have to be in Peru. It could even be domestic projects. We thought about maybe the possibility of doing projects in northern Alberta and some remote communities there and stuff like that. Anyway, there are 4 major learning outcomes for the course. Students will be able to demonstrate intercultural communication strategies that integrate cultural awareness and sensitivity. The second one is students will be able to examine their own intercultural capabilities and awareness and develop a plan for strengthening intercultural skills. So that one sort of connects to lifelong learning, having an intercultural development plan so that you can continue improving your intercultural skills long into the future. The third one is discuss how issues of energy in the environment affect different groups of people. So that's perspective taking, looking at different issues from different kinds of perspectives. And then number 4 is more related to project management and that sort of thing. Perform a risk assessment and develop a risk mitigation plan specific to a planned project region. That last one is really useful for students for planning what they're going to be doing while they're in Peru on the project. They explore in great detail what are all the potential things that could happen that might go wrong, and we put in place all sorts of different kinds of risk mitigation strategies to set students' minds at ease, so that they know that if something does happen, that we've got a plan and we'll be able to deal with it.
What a
So those
great
are
course
so
to take. Sorry.
yeah, I think so. Sure is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience with developing learning outcomes and about your course. So Paul, how did you approach outcomes? So would you mind sharing more about it for
Sure.
your program?
So so we do it a little bit differently. I mean, we don't have an actual course that our trip and our travel is tied to. So for us, we're looking at more of that cultural type of outcomes. So this is in part of the agreement that we have with all three countries, where we're further developing our respective faculties and providing those unique learning opportunities for our students. So in that month that our students are overseas, they're actually working in operating restaurants and hotels and those types of environments. So they're in that live environment. They have customers coming in and having to interact with them. So really, it's a little bit of a different experience where we're not necessarily focused on just a project, if you will, right? And so some of the other benefits that we have and some of the other outcomes, we're assisting each other in terms of those universities and other schools, through that administrative cooperation, any cross marketing, and any other activities that we're doing. And then, of course, there's that faculty mentoring as well, right? So, we have two instructors that will travel. They'll each spend 2 weeks within that area. And, we'll learn from the chefs that are there. We'll learn from the people that are running the hotels, and be able to talk about some of the things that they do compared to what we do, and really, bring some of that back and incorporate that into all of our other classes that we have here on campus. So a little bit different than what Doug does and how Doug's program runs. So a little bit, two different ways that anybody that's interested in making those partnerships and having these exchanges happen, two different ways of looking at it.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. And as you may notice, so both of these study abroad experiences, so Doug and Paul, they did have partners, and in different ways they had them. So finding a partner in a place where you want to go, that's one of the important steps. So just to give a general advice, and Doug will share in more details how they worked with their partner. So just some general advice on how to find a partner. So you can brainstorm industry-related nonprofit organizations interested in supporting the initiative. There are many organizations in your industry. We're pretty sure. Also, connecting with a global professional network might be also a good idea. And Doug will share more about his experience finding a partner.
All right, sure. Yeah. We first made contact or a connection with Light Up the World. It was the chair of our program, Jim Sandercock. He met the executive director of Light Up the World through a board that they were both on. It was the Energy Futures board. And when Jim met the executive director, Christoph Schultz at the time, he put me into contact with Christoph because I was interested in what they do, and we started talking and decided to do a project together. And our partnership with Light Up the World has been just fantastic. We would not be able to do these projects without them. And basically, what they do is almost everything. Like I get the students together and I prepare them to go to Peru, and we give them some hands-on training in terms of how to install an off-grid solar energy system. But what Light Up the World does is they provide translation for us while we're in Peru. They speak Spanish there, and in the communities that we visit, they actually speak Quechua. That's their first language. So they provide translation. While we're there, they give us guidance on safety, security, risk mitigation. They take care of all of the logistics within Peru. They plan all of our transportation, our ground transportation, our domestic air transportation. They take care of all of the meals, the accommodations, everything basically. And every place that we stop, so we start in Lima, the capital city of Peru. Then we go to a smaller city. This year we're going to Ayacucho. And then we go to a project community way up high in the Andes, usually in some remote location. Every place that we stop, we always have a cultural orientation where we learn a little bit about the local people and their culture, their customs, and that sort of thing. And we do a little bit of a orientation and a tour, and we meet some people, and it's just fantastic. And then during the actual clean energy installation project, the Light Up the World staff, they do a lot of the supervision for that as well. So they're able to provide training, hands-on training in terms of doing the actual installation project too.
Awesome. I wish everyone who's watching this session partner like Light Up the World. So hoping that you can find one. So speaking about partnerships, so if you have a partner, you will have to have some sort of education abroad agreement, or sometimes it's called MOU or Memorandum of Understanding. So this is a legal agreement between NAIT and your partner. So usually it involves multi-year agreement to set up visits, and content of the agreement, it varies, and maybe Doug can speak in more details what this agreement usually involves.
Sure. Well, I can speak to the contents of our agreement that we have with Light Up the World on the next slide. So, first of all, the agreement that we have with Light Up the World, the process for getting that agreement in place was a little bit complicated. It started with me having a conversation with Light Up the World and thinking, hey, this is a great idea. We should do a project together. And then we connected with NAIT Global Education and Partnerships, who helped us through the rest of the process. We worked with Jim Sandercock, the program chair. We're working with Ann Faylauer, who's our department head. And then after we have a pretty good idea of what we want to do at the program level and the department level, then we go to the dean's office and we consult with the dean's office as well. Once we have a pretty good idea of what we want to do for the project, then the NAIT legal team puts together the actual agreement itself. And then it gets signed on our side by the dean of the school and the vice president, either of finance or academic, of NAIT. And then on the Light Up the World side, it got signed by the executive director, somebody with executive signing authority. In terms of the contents, I think that's on the next slide.
Let's see.
Maybe not. The contents of the agreement basically just state a little bit about what each side brings to the table for the agreement. What is the Light Up the World responsible for with each visit, and what is NAIT responsible for? And there are some things in there about intellectual property and protection of privacy and things like that.
So I just want to mention one thing. So we have those legal templates, these memorandums of understanding and agreements, because our legal team developed them. So these are this can be used as a template, as a sample. It can be modified and finalized with the legal team. So, and we as a Global Education Partnership team, we can definitely connect you with the legal team and facilitate this introduction. But these templates and samples are available because Doug did such a wonderful job and initiated this process. So yeah, like legal side of things, like we have a pretty good start if you want to develop a study abroad experience. So we're looking at planning for each visit overview, and you can see it involves many things, and we will be giving a high-level overview. And let's start with understanding with your partner or scope of work? So, Doc, could you speak to that, or Paul?
I think we could probably both speak to this, because I mean, we do have again, both of our programs are just slightly different, right? So obviously, we can certainly say, the one that is in common for sure is to make sure that everyone knows what is expected to happen and who's responsible for which tasks, right? I mean, you never want to go on one of these trips and all of a sudden nothing is planned, and you don't have somebody picking you up at the airport, for example, right? Where the two differ a little bit, obviously, is if money changes hands. I know in some of our conversations, Doug, you're paying the Light Up the World to help you with some of those things. For us in our program, we don't have any money that changes hands, right? So we have a little bit less responsibility from that standpoint. But these are all very, very important things that you have to keep in mind, when planning these trips.
And Doc, I believe that you have a slightly different experience.
Yeah, it's very similar, but just like Paul said, if money changes hands, then it gets more complicated. As soon as money changes hands, then you have to have some sort of document written up. We call our document, it's kind of like a contract. We call it a scope of work. And then in that scope of work, which is kind of like a contract, we have an agreement. So there's an initial multi-year agreement with Light Up the World. And then for each individual visit, we have a scope of work. And the scope of work provides the specific details for each individual visit. So for this coming May, for example, I'm in the process of writing up the scope of work. It's going to include the dates and the itinerary for everything that we're going to do during the visit. We're going to outline the expected number of student participants and staff participants as well. We pay fees to Light Up the World because they book all of our ground transportation, our domestic air transportation. They book our accommodations, and they take care of our meals and all sorts of things. So we have to pay them for all that. And yeah, there's a description of what is done by whom. So what sort of activities are planned and executed by Light Up the World, and what sort of things do we do on our end as well. And then because we're moving money to our partner to Light Up the World, the way we have it worked out right now is we send them one big check from NAIT to cover all of the costs for all of the participants. In the past, the way we worked it out was each individual student would pay Light Up the World their fee. If it's paid by NAIT, then you definitely need that scope of work. It has to be signed by the dean of your school and by Light Up the World or your partner. And then the partner organization, in our case, it's Light Up the World, they have to send an invoice to the dean's office in order to get the money moving. That invoice gets approved by the dean's office, and then it gets sent to NAIT accounts payable. And one of the things that we needed to watch out for is fiscal year end. A lot of our planning takes place in March, and the fiscal year end is now March 30th. And the NAIT finance people don't want anything to happen after about March 15th or so. Between March 15th and March 30th, they just get way too busy, and they don't want to have to work with any of this kind of stuff. So watch out for that kind of thing.
So we already started talking about money. So,
Yeah.
and on the next slide, we'll be talking about budget, affordability, and accessibility.
Yeah, I guess no, go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, we can both speak to this one as well, right? I mean, obviously those cost estimates, right? Airfare, in our case, our accommodations are covered, our meals are covered, other than a few of them that we have to pay for ourselves. And same with ground transportation. So we have those arrangements where, when we're traveling, I'll use Italy as an example. Our hosts came to the airport, picked us up, transported us to where we needed to be, dropped us off at hotels. They covered all of those costs for us. So from that perspective, and in the culinary side of things, we really try and keep our costs down where our students have to pay for that airfare and then spending money, right? So, from a funding perspective, it really is inexpensive for our student to travel. And I know, Doug, your experience has been a little bit different where, you guys have to do a little bit more fundraising. It does cost you a little bit more money to be able to do these projects.
Yeah, you've done a great job of working with your partners. I guess it's a reciprocal arrangement, so it's great to have your meals and your accommodations, your ground transport all kind of taken care of. For us, it's Light Up the World that takes care of that, and we pay them a fee. And the way that we made that work financially, I guess, to make it affordable and accessible to as many students as possible is I was fortunate enough to be able to get grant funding from a global skills opportunity grant from the federal government. If it wasn't for that grant, the cost would be prohibitive to most of the students in the alternative energy technology program. Only the wealthiest students would be able to afford to be able to go, and that would be very unfortunate. So affordability and accessibility is something that people should keep in mind. If you can't find grant funding, if you're not fortunate enough to be able to find grant funding, then you should definitely try to find ways to keep those costs down, or other sources of revenue like fundraising or donors or something like that. NAIT also has Global Experience Awards. Do you want to speak about that, Mila?
Yes, sure. So uh, years ago, NAIT was able to secure this funding, this award. So basically, it covers any student who goes uh, to who goes abroad for studying or field schools. So currently, it's $500 per student. Not a lot of money, but also it helps with covering some accommodations. So this is great that we still have this money. Um, yeah, so this is what's currently available. And also, I'd like to add that we have an amazing grant coordinator, Priyanka Sharma, who is constantly searching for this grant opportunity. So also we, as a global education team, we can connect you with her and you can explore opportunities together because there is something going on. So world of funding and grants, it's a wonderful world. So we can definitely help you navigate that.
Yeah, over the years there've been a variety of different grants available, and yeah, so Priya can probably help quite a bit with that. And those grants sort of come and go. There used to be a province of Alberta version of the grant called the Campus Alberta Grant for International Learning, and hopefully we'll see that one come back sometime soon. And then when you think about your budget, there are some challenges that I've come across as well. If you don't have full enrollment, that might change the cost to students. If a participant backs out at the last minute or they can't go for some reason, that can affect the costs and stuff. Um, I've also found that some of the grants are restricted and you're only allowed to give the money to students that are either Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So there's complications in there, and you have to watch out for that. And you need to make sure, I guess the bottom line about those challenges is you need to make sure that the students are aware that the final cost of the program isn't necessarily set until very close to when you travel. You might have to adjust the price of the program. Either that or somebody has to take on that financial risk. It's either going to be put on the students or it's going to be put on your program or your department or something like that, because things can happen that affect the price.
Thank you. And since we started talking about challenges, it's super important to talk about risk identification and mitigation plan. So let's talk about that.
Okay, well, I can speak to this. There are all sorts of risks that you should consider. So there's health and safety risks, of course, and security. But you should also consider financial risks, just like I mentioned in that last slide. One very helpful resource for risk identification is the Government of Canada website, travel.gc.ca, and they've got sort of three levels of risks that they outline. They have global risks. So when COVID was when COVID was recognized as being a huge global pandemic and very problematic, the Government of Canada had a risk level of level 3, avoid non-essential travel all across the world. I should probably explain these risk levels. So risk level 1, exercise a normal degree of caution. That is for very safe countries. In fact, most countries in Europe are at least a level 2. You would think that the United Kingdom and France and Germany and places like that might be exercise a normal degree of caution, but they aren't. They're at level 2, which is exercise a high degree of caution. We are permitted at NAIT to travel at level 1 or level 2. We can't travel if there's a risk level of 3 or 4. So level 3 is avoid non-essential travel. And that could be at a global level. For example, with the COVID pandemic, there was no travel allowed at NAIT because the whole world was at a level 3. Or it could be at a country level. So there are some countries that are just simply not safe enough to travel to, and they'll be at a level 3. Or there can be regional warnings within a country. So for example, in Peru, the country of Peru is at a level 2, exercise a high degree of caution. But there are certain regions within Peru that are at a level 3, and we can't travel there. One of our projects we had originally planned for a region that was very close to a region that's at level 3, and so we decided not to go there, and we changed to a different project location. We went to a safer place in Peru that was at a level 2. So those are things that you need to watch out for, and you can find out the Government of Canada risk level by going to the website and looking that up. Another thing to watch out for is different countries in the world have different attitudes towards people that are LGBTQ+. If you want to learn more about different countries and what their sort of level of equality, I guess, is, or tolerance, or whatever for LGBTQ+, I found that the website Equaldex does a pretty good job of explaining what the situation is in individual countries. You need travel medical insurance to all participants, including the students and the staff, will need travel medical insurance to participate in one of these programs. The NAIT staff, Alberta Blue Cross travel medical insurance is adequate. It's perfectly good. There's no problem with it. It includes emergency medical evacuation and that sort of thing. You should be able to go to the Alberta Blue Cross website and download a copy of the policy, and you can read through it and get an idea of what's covered and what's not covered and that sort of thing. It's pretty good insurance. I haven't had a problem with that. And the students that don't opt out also have travel medical insurance through NAITSA. So NAITSA, excuse me, NAITSA provides travel medical insurance, but students are allowed to opt out of it. Now, most students don't opt out unless they have coverage through one of their parents. So if their parents have travel medical insurance through Blue Cross or some other kind of program, then some students will opt out. but I have found that some students opt out even when their parents don't have coverage and they don't have travel medical insurance. So you do need to make sure that those students purchase outside travel medical insurance. They do need to have that before they can go. And it's not usually not that expensive. I think it's usually under $100. The travel medical insurance doesn't cover cancellation. So it doesn't cover cancellation of airfare or, if you have to pay in advance for accommodations or anything like that, that's not covered. So you might want to consider travel cancellation insurance as well. And what we do for our program is we advise students that they may or may not want to purchase travel cancellation insurance. We leave that up to them, but they need to understand that they're taking on a financial risk. They can either mitigate that risk with insurance, but then they have to pay for it, or they can just take on that risk. That's up to them. A resource that NAIT provides for students that travel abroad and for staff as well is it's called International SOS, and that is a service that it's a company that provides all sorts of useful information for your travel destination while you're traveling. They'll send you updates as you go about any kind of risks that might be taking place within your region. And if there is an emergency within your region, they provide 24/7 assistance while you're there as well, which is very helpful, or could be very helpful should the need arise.
That's awesome. That's great. And I believe one last piece about risk identification and mitigation plan. So we have a template for NAIT, and our risk team raised a document that was developed by Doug, and we treat it as a golden standard, and I'm quoting. So we do have this template available to mitigate all the risk. It's a very lengthy document. It's like, I believe, like several pages long. So it's also available as a resource for you. So we took alternative energy technology study abroad experience as an example. And yeah, you can use that when assessing your risks and developing a mitigation plan.
And that risk identification and mitigation plan is a great thing to show your students as well, because then your students have an idea of exactly what sort of things they have to watch out for, and they know what they're getting into and how to behave appropriately in the country.
Yeah. And then we're moving into recruiting and selecting participants for your study abroad experience.
Yeah, so again, I think that Doug and I have, both two different kind of approaches for this as well, right? So for us, we have, we open it up to all of our students. So in the culinary program, we could potentially have, 200 students that are wanting to go on these trips for, where we only have 6 spots. So, we have very few spots available to a large group of students. So for us, we have a program page where we put up all of the information on there. So it has, the application process and all that kind of information there, and students can access that at any time. For us, our program page actually has a whole bunch of other information on there too. So, we do a lot of different competitions and things like that in the culinary department. And so students have that information right from the very first day that they are registered within our program. From there, we set up an information session for our students to attend. So if they're interested, they can come by and we do a little PowerPoint presentation and talk about the experience and talk about lots of the things that we've already gone over here in the PowerPoint. So we talk about risk mitigation. We talk about some of the costs. We talk about those expectations. Then we have an application process. So there are certain things that we have that our students have to do to be able to go on this and have this opportunity. So, there's an essay they have to write and different criteria that they have to meet. We expect that our students are, obviously in good academic standing when it comes to their academics here at NAIT. So that means a minimum GPA of that 2.0, which is what students at NAIT have to have. Obviously, if you have a higher GPA, that can, positively affect your application, right? Like I said, they have to write an essay on, the country that we happen to be visiting, whether it is Italy, Portugal, or the Philippines. Why do they want to go on this trip, right? So those are all things that we look at. And then, of course, we have a rubric for grading. So, everyone is graded on the same scale. And from there, we'll also do an interview with the student as well. So we'll break it down, and I'll just throw a number. Let's say we have 20 students that apply. We're going to take the top 10. We're going to have interviews with those students as well. Again, just to get a feel for, the reasons why they want to go, find out some things. Have they traveled before? Are they comfortable traveling? Is this going to be their first time going overseas, without their parents and kind of be on their own, right? We want to make sure that they're comfortable doing those types of things, and make sure that it's a good experience for them. You never want to be halfway across the world and you have a student that is now, and for us, spending a month in a foreign country, and a weekend they're homesick and they're missing home, and they want to return to home, right? So we want to make sure to kind of mitigate all of that before we make that travel. And now we also have the same application process for staff, right? So again, our program, we open that up to our 18 different instructors that we have here, so that if they want to travel, they can put in an application and say, yes, I want to be able to go. These are the reasons why, and here's all of my supporting documents to be able to do that. And I know, Doug, I believe you're the only one that travels in your program. I don't think you have anyone else that goes with you from an instructor standpoint. So again, depending on how these other programs want to set this up, maybe it's one specific person or two specific people that are going to be doing the traveling. Maybe you want to open up to everyone. So you need to have some of these things in place.
Thank you so much for sharing and shedding some light on your recruitment and selection process. So, yeah, that's really great to know. And we're actually close to the end. And so an overview of other things that would need to happen when you're planning each visit. So, and I'll just give a high-level overview. So basically, there will be pre-departure training information for students happening sometime right before their trip. Then another important piece that needs to happen is an approval for student or staff travel. Also, you might have some sort of social media or like marketing campaign for your study abroad experience, either maybe before the trip, if for instance, if you're still recruiting students, or afterwards. If you haven't read the article about Doug's student group on NAIT website, I believe you should absolutely do that, and also listen to a podcast. It's just amazing to hear about firsthand experiences. And also another part that will happen is a post-program debrief. So when students go abroad, they come back. So this is another piece of each visit. And so I believe that so once students are getting ready to go, so maybe Doug, so would you mind speaking about that, like learning events and kind of preparing students for an actual trip?
Sure, yeah. Again, Paul and I have two different types of programs, and we have two different kinds of approaches and experiences with this. Our international experience for students is connected to a class now, and it's a 15-week winter semester class. So we have 15 weeks where we can get our students prepared to go. So it's just fantastic. We've got 3 hours of classroom time per week where we do all sorts of intercultural learning and intercultural development planning, that sort of thing. For the program that we have going this May in 2023, I've already got the students learning some Spanish on Duolingo. I facilitate a Duolingo classroom, and so that helps. We're also going to get together and do some conversational Spanish as well, which will be a lot of fun. And during those 15 weeks, we've got all sorts of time to work on the travel logistics planning and talk about the risks. And I actually have the students investigate the risks on their own, and they do a risk identification and mitigation plan as an assignment for the class. So by the time they get through that assignment, they're very comfortable with what kinds of risks they're going to be facing and what we're going to be doing to mitigate those risks. But yeah, at the end of the whole process, at the end of the 15 weeks, there is a waiver form that students have to sign. It's drafted by NAIT Legal Counsel, but what we do in the waiver largely is we refer to the risk identification and mitigation plan so that students are aware of which risks they're taking on. And yeah, that largely summarizes what we do in terms of preparing students to get ready to go.
Yeah, and the nice thing you have there, Doug, like you said, you talked about, you have 15 weeks to, to kind of get the students, one, to kind of know each other, right? Because of course, you're traveling together, and so that's fantastic that you can do that, right? For me, I may have students in their second semester and students in their fourth semester that haven't really met before. So I've got a little bit of time where we get together. We do try to do some of the language learning, of course. But we'll try and do a few things. I'll have the students over for dinner, and they all have to make a little potluck, just to, again, to try and get to know each other a little bit, to make sure that everyone traveling and staying in the same rooms are going to be compatible, right? Because again, that can be a worry, right? You have to now live with somebody that you've never lived with for a month. So
Yeah, a little bit of team building
yes.
exercises.
Yeah, team building is definitely
Sounds
important.
great. And then something that will happen after study abroad experience happens. So it's post-program debrief. So usually global education helps with post-trip debrief, helping students make sense of their experiences, and it can go into so many directions. So connecting their experience to their career planning, job searching, things like how to put this experience on their resumes, how to talk about this experience. Of course, intercultural learning, because this is huge, because for some people, it might be their first experience going abroad, and not as a tourist, because study abroad, it's a very different experience compared to you're a tourist and you're working there, you're doing a project. So this is something that is happening after students are back in Canada. So anything that you would like to add about post-program experience?
Well, I was very happy with the way NAIT Global Education helps to facilitate that post-program debrief, because I myself, when I get back from these experiences, I'm just overwhelmed with all the things that I saw and I did and I learned, and it really helps to talk about it, to make sense of what we actually did and what we learned and how to articulate that to other people. So this is something that is actually a really important part of the whole learning experience.
Yeah, and I think too that all the students that I've ever spoken to that have gone overseas have come back and said, you know what, I never realized that I was going to learn this or see this or experience this, right? You have an idea of what it may be like but until you're actually there and experiencing it, you don't actually know, right? And so they bring back those wonderful experiences and are able to share that with, not only faculty but other students, right? So it is, fantastic experience for whoever's able to do this.
Great. And we're actually at the end of our presentation, and we hope that as we were talking, that you kind of realized that it takes a village to send a student abroad. So here you see a list of teams of stakeholders, people who can help you with developing this experience. So it starts with school leadership, and like you will need a leading instructor and school staff members, global education partnership teams, student awards and financial aid, student at the center, marketing and communication team, legal department, our risk management and insurance team. So all these teams, all these stakeholders, people will be helping you to set up your international experience. And I'd like to mention one last thing. So what can global education team can do for you? So we can connect you to the right team. So we have, as I mentioned, some resources, templates that we can share with you. We can provide you guidance throughout the process. So you might be our first contact when you, for instance, decide to develop international experience for students. We can help with pre-departure training and post-trip debrief. But this is not an exhaustive list of things that we can do, because we're also growing, we're learning. And yeah, so that's the end of our presentation. And I don't know, any last comments from Doug and Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to just say that it might seem a little bit overwhelming when you see all of the steps in this presentation all at once, but it's all doable. And global education and partnerships, they can guide you through the whole process. So um, there's people that can help. It's not overwhelming. You can do it. And yeah, NAIT Global Education can help you, and I'm sure that Paul and I would be very willing to help you as well. I'm willing to help as a mentor or provide any example documents or whatever you might need.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that, it's wonderful that you have all these resources now here at NAIT to be able to do this and to be able to set that up. And like you said, Doug, I have no problem helping anybody, mitigate some of these, processes or answering questions or, giving a little bit of guidance for sure.
Thank you. Thank you both. And yeah, it concludes our presentation. And thank you very much for watching.